This holiday season, you might be looking for nutritious, convenient meals to keep you energized on jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, can help you fuel up fast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle while tackling all your holiday to-dos. Too busy with holiday plans to cook, but want to make sure you're eating well? With Factor, skip the extra trip to the grocery store and the chopping, prepping, and cleaning up too, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy. When you're too busy running around to plan lunch, Factor has you covered with lunch to go. Effortless, wholesome meals like grain bowls and salad toppers that are ready to eat when you're on the go, no microwave required. Head to factormeals.com/MC911pod50 and use code MC911pod50 to get 50% off. That's code MC911pod50 at factormeals.com/MC911pod50 to get 50% off. Hey y'all, hope you've been having a good one. Just wanted to pop in here and get a bit of bonus content to everyone. This is the audio from the panel discussion I was part of in Atlanta a couple weeks ago. It was a ton of fun, and I always love getting to see my podcast friends and, of course, any listeners too. I talk about all the podcasts that were there, but you'll get to hear about all that during the episode. All of them are great shows, and I highly encourage everyone to seek them out and give them a listen. Big thanks to the Jasons for putting this all together and making this available for everyone to listen to. I'll leave it at that and let y'all listen. Y'all have a good one.
This is a Silver Linings Handbook podcast bonus episode. I'm Jason Blair. Hey friends, today we're sharing a bonus episode from our December meetup in Atlanta with several podcasters. There, I facilitated a discussion on the motivations behind hosting and producing true crime podcasts. The panel included Brandon Hall from Music City 911 podcast, Nina Instead from Already Gone, Dana Pohl from True Crime PI, Robert Palmer from the Broken System podcast, and Jason Ursay from Santa May Be a Criminal. For those of you who could not make it to the Omni Hotel in the Battery in Atlanta, I want to share this illuminating panel discussion with you and those who made it who would like to re-listen.
Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all for coming. What we're going to do today, we're going to do a bunch of different things today. We're going to do a panel with all of our podcasters here. We're going to do some trivia. We're going to do some other fun stuff. I think it's awesome to have all these wonderful people here. As somebody who's not, technically not a true crime podcast host, allegedly, I have so many true crime podcasters on. I do really love the things that, one of the neat things for me about being a part of this community is really realizing the depth of caring, compassion, that so many people are driven to this kind of work because they truly care and want to make a difference. So I think we have a group of people here, and to you guys who are on the live too. We have a group of people here who really sort of fit that mold and share that value. So I'm excited for this conversation. Brett just left, but I want to give special credit to Brett and Alice from the prosecutors, because at least for Jason, Robert, and I, and then I know all you all through Jason, that's the community that really brought us together. And for me, at least, I never imagined that I would start following true crime podcasts and all of a sudden find a community of loving, caring, passionate friends, including you guys. So part of what I'll do quick intros to the people who are here and then let them introduce themselves. But part of what we're going to talk about today is really being able to explore what sort of motivates them to do what they do on their podcast, the why behind what they do, and some ideas that they have for podcasting in the future. So I'll go in order here. We've got Brandon Hall. Brandon, his podcast is Music City 911. He spent 20 plus years working as a 911 emergency dispatcher. And for me, it's fascinating, the idea of being able to bring that voice and that perspective to the world, because I don't think I know of another podcast that's like that. But he really, Brandon himself has been involved in things like the Nashville Christmas Day bombing in 2022, floods, I think, and other, your normal routine things. He's the calm voice on the other end of the line that we all want to be there. So I think it's awesome that he's bringing that into the world and helping us learn from that. And then I've got Dana Pohl here from True Crime PI. Journalism, communications, I can relate to that, and I'm glad you don't hate me. I always have to worry every time I hang out with a journalist. But also studied library information science. And for those of you who listen to our podcast, it's obviously deeply researched and reported, so you can see those skills coming up there. But part of the reason why I think it stands out is definitely for the research, but the exploration, and it's very similar for Nina at the other end of the table, of the unidentified and the missing. The people who don't make the big headlines, they don't make the front page stories, but there's still families out there who are hurting or wondering. And, the idea that some of the missing may be brought home alive, some of the unidentified may be identified, some of the missing, we may figure out what happened to them, even if it's a bad outcome. It's really healing and powerful for the families. And it's nice to have podcasts that are focused on that area. And then we have the clown, Jason. I think you're my most frequent guest. No, you're tied for Julia Callie right now. But Jason Ursi from the And It May Be a Criminal podcast. I'm going to keep this really short because I love telling the story of your podcast. But Jason brings the true crime, the true crime world a satirical podcast that explores whether Santa's a criminal. But what I like to say is his podcast isn't really about that. It's about love, joy, hope, grace. Sort of the meaning of Christmas. And we're searching for that thing, that magical thing. And I do appreciate your podcast. And then finally, Robert Palmer. Not finally, sorry. Yeah. Robert Palmer, he's the host of the Broken System podcast. Robert's podcast really explores, in its first season, he'll tell you about it in a sec, explores a case, DJ Ficky. And it's one of the neat things about Robert's podcast is it really does explore the systems around the criminal justice system and what might be broken and gives you a roadmap on what to fix. But in that first season, one of the coolest things is he explored a kind of case that might surprise you in terms of how it doesn't get attention. And that's a white male who ends up the victim of a violent crime. In this case, also drug addiction and other things played a role. But he's shining, kind of like Nina and Dana are, shining a light on an area that we sometimes don't pay a ton of attention to. And then Nina instead. Sorry, Nina. From the Already Gone podcast. Nina lives in the Atlanta area, but her podcast started focusing on the Great Lakes region in Michigan. And very similar to Dana in the sense that she explores a lot of cases that involve missing, unidentified people, brings an interesting perspective and a unique perspective to all of that. So I think you guys, hopefully you get an idea of what I was saying in the beginning, that this is a really neat group of podcasters with really neat values who are trying to bring good things to the world. So I'll go ahead and facilitate the conversation. I'll try to talk.
Who are you?
Normally.
Who are you?
Yeah. Who are you? Oh, that's a really good point. Jason Blatt. I am the host of the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. We are not a true crime podcast. I'm kidding. So our podcast began earlier this year. And initially, we were really focusing on psychology and some of the things that I do right now. My background is a former journalist. I am a executive coach and a life coach now. But what we found as we started doing episodes was, despite all my great planning, my podcast really wasn't about what I thought it was about. It's really about conversations with really interesting people where we learn about the world, where we grow, and where we're inspired. And no matter what I try to do, no matter what angle I try to take, it comes back to those things. So I'm really thrilled to be able to facilitate this conversation. Hopefully I'll do a relatively decent job. So for our guests, I'm going to go ahead and grab a seat and get us started. I wanted to start with Jason, since you're the one who sort of brought us all together. You're sort of the outlier in the group. You're a fictional podcast. No. You are also the glue that holds us all together. But one of the things, as somebody who's not really a true crime podcaster, but who really is interested in some of the related topics, I was thinking about the idea that your podcast is about true crime, but I think it's fictional. And it tells the story of an investigative podcaster, shocking, who's Richie. And he's really on that quest to find out what they're saying as a criminal. But I wanted to ask you, what you really wanted to try to bring in the world.
Well, I mean, I think that there are a lot of interesting conversations in the true crime space, particularly right now. And I wanted to, I love true crime podcasts. So I wanted to do something that I was interested in. I love Christmas. And I wanted to shine a light on that. It brings me a lot of joy. But I wanted to take a different path to explore a lot of the topics that we're going to be talking about today. But from a lens of, from a naive sort of perspective. I wanted Richie to start out really not very good at what he was doing. I wanted the show to sound better as the show continued on, even though I work in television. So I knew how to do it, but I wanted it to be very intentional that Richie was learning what he was going along as he was going along. But I just thought it'd be fun to have some of these conversations that go on in the true crime space from a place that we could laugh about, because it's really easy for people to get really angry. And there's a lot of anger in the true crime space when it should be a place that's really accepting.
It's kind of interesting, because one of the things that I often think about when I'm listening to your podcast is, wow, these are all the things that are going on under the surface in the true crime space that nobody really openly wants to talk about. But we're able to talk about it through.
Yeah, right. I get away with a lot because it's satire, But yeah, I just wanted to kind of take a run at those conversations, and I also wanted it to be something that people who like true crime could listen to and still feel happy after they listen to it, because I know that a lot of the topics you all do, like on your shows, are really difficult topics. And, I know that takes an emotional toll on the creators, that listeners sometimes want to take a break from that kind of stuff. So I sort of counter-programmed it as well. So yeah, that's kind of.
I've heard you, I don't think you describe it this way, but I think one of your listeners described it as kind of like a palate cleanser.
I've heard that a lot, actually. Yeah,
it's the sorbet that we can.
Yes, yeah, it's which is great. I love being in that space, and I have a lot of respect for everybody that does the work that I personally can't research. Hence why trivia was generated by ChatGPT today. I don't know if it's correct, if the answers are right, but that's what ChatGPT told me. But yeah, no, I have a lot of respect for the people that put in the hard work, the really emotionally taxing work in these shows, and all the other creators. So I just wanted to do something a little different and give somebody a little bit of a laugh here. Hopefully people laugh about it.
So that's sort of what you're looking to your listeners to get.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I was going to ask you the same thing, Nina, and just thinking about your podcast and, you explore, I think, a lot of tough topics, but at the same time, things that, aren't getting covered by everyone. What were you looking to bring in the world with yours?
So when I started the podcast, I really wanted to focus on cases that were in the area where I lived, like places that I knew, because that was interesting to me. And then I found myself working as a missing persons advocate, which really changed my perspective because all of a sudden I was dealing with these families that were struggling and were in crisis. And it gave me a totally different perspective on the work.
How did it change your perspective?
I realized how important it was to be careful and thoughtful when creating, because the families listen, the friends listen, the communities listen. This is someone that they knew, someone that they cared about. So it's very important how you speak of the missing person or of the murdered person and how they ended up that way.
The tiny word, talking about the background, the way that you kind of, that's it. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think of that as in some of the true crime discussions, some of the creators are often, not necessarily talking to victims. They're going off of news reports. And I just remember as a journalist that once you sort of sit in the room with the person who just lost their loved one, or even the family of the person who's the suspect, it really changes your perspective on even the smallest words. And I was just having a conversation. It may have been on the podcast. I don't know. It all blurs for me. But about a situation that we had where we were reporting on a story and there were really gruesome details. And it was an important story, but there was no reason to put the gruesome details. It added no value. It told you nothing new. And it's just really interesting that once you've been in that room, you take care to do things that you wouldn't normally.
It gives you a thoughtfulness, I think.
What originally got you interested in it at all? I know you said you wanted to focus on close to home.
So when I was a little girl, there was a serial killer murdering children in the area that I lived in. And they took a child from the school that I ended up attending from my neighborhood. So ever since I was literally a toddler, they're like serial killers or something I've been aware of.
Wow.
And this person was never found or identified.
Cool.
How did it affect you?
Growing up in Oakland County with the Oakland County child killer being active, I think it affected all of us kids and our parents, that it gives you a situational awareness that kids who didn't grow up around this may not have, because it was very real.
But it had to, I would imagine, also change your life in real tangible ways. Like maybe your parents wouldn't let you.
Well, my parents would let me do it. They were never around.
So maybe not your parents.
Maybe not mine. But other parents became very mindful and stopped letting kids walk to school. Like the elementary school that I attended for kindergarten didn't have a drive-up lane to pick up kids. And they needed it because a girl from that school was murdered in the neighborhood. And I remember walking to school with my grandmother and seeing all of these cars jammed up around the school because there was no place for them to go. And it was, there's a little bit of chaos involved. And I think that sort of disorganized but very intense scenario was left an impression.
Yeah, I was recently talking to someone about Delphi, Indiana, where, Abby and Libby were lost. And, we were talking about the idea of, someone writing a book to tell the story. After listening to them, I was like, oh no, that's not the right book. The whole town is a victim. Like that town is forever changed in ways that we don't read about and that we don't see. And it's not just the fear, it's the media coverage, it's the other things along those lines. And I was talking to them and they said, the town is traumatized.
Absolutely.
The entire town is traumatized. There's trauma on top, Well, thanks for answering that, and thanks for going there. I turn it to, I'm going to mix it up and throw it to you, Brandon.
Okay.
What were you looking to bring in the world with yours? I just thinking about the idea that there isn't another podcast out there. Did you even know it would be as successful as it was? What does success count as?
Yeah, well, when I started it was me and another dispatcher, believe it or not. He had just retired. He had been a dispatcher for 40 years.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, I was, I'd been there 20. So we'd been, friends for literally decades. And it's kind of started off as just kind of a buddy chat type thing where it was, we thought we were going to have other 911 dispatchers listening and police officers, stuff like that. And that's where we thought it was going to go. But he had retired. He wanted to fully retire. He had no idea how much work and effort went into
a podcast. Yeah.
So he wanted to just remain fully retired. And, I took it on myself, and I had random guests past that, but it just took a little while. But really the biggest thing was just letting people know about people like our 911 dispatchers. I mean, growing up, everybody has an idea of what a police officer does or what a firefighter does, or, just about any job like that. But there are so few 911 dispatchers in comparison, and they're all kind of behind the scenes. They're faceless. You don't know what actually happens other than the rare case of, a 911 call getting released to a news outlet or something like that. Which is still pretty rare. I wanted to bring that out to the forefront, and doing that, showing what sort of things we actually go through as dispatchers. There for the longest time, we were just considered secretaries, and I think still in some states it's considered that. We're in Tennessee, luckily, we're now considered first responders. But it was the same classification as a school secretary, for instance. That we had the same type of nationwide classification. So that's one of the things. Sorry, that might have been mine. So yeah, I just wanted to bring it out and show what was going on, kind of behind the scenes, telling what we look for. And also I try to be, that's one of the things with true crime. It is entertainment for a lot of people. And I can understand that, but I wanted to do that as well as be educational with it. So let people learn about it.
I remember when, many years ago, I had a woman who came to work to our office, as, I forget what job, I think it was office manager. And she had worked, this is in Fairfax County, Virginia, she had worked as a 911 dispatcher. And she had done the training. And in DC, you have to get certain clearances because you're involved in, so it's a real investment in addition to the regular training. But after about 6 months, she stopped. And I asked her, we're hiring in 6 months. Why did you stop? And she said, it's too much. You're involved in everything that goes wrong in the world. And I think for me, that was the first time I really thought about that kind of job. Even though I was a journalist and I covered crime, it's the first time I really thought about that job as being a frontline responder, as dumb as that is, right? Like, it's dumb for me to miss that one, at least in my mind. But it's the one place that's involved in everything.
Yeah, and it's a lot of people don't realize too the amount of calls that are taken in. Like a police officer may go on 2-3 calls per day, and a 911 dispatcher may get anywhere from 100, 150, 200 calls they're helping out with every single day. So it's there's a lot of things that just people don't know about it, and that's what I try to bring to light to people.
Very cool. Well, glad it's here. I know it's popular. I know everybody loves it, and I'm glad, Jason, that you introduced us. So I guess, Robert, I'll throw it to you, and then we can wrap with Dana. What were you looking to do when you started your podcast? I know you were on my podcast, and then one of the questions I asked you was, did you come up with a podcast, the idea of doing a podcast first, or the story first? And you really were inspired by listening to another podcast and the way that they handled the story, and said, I want to do it the opposite of that.
Absolutely. So for me, it started as, I knew I wanted to do a podcast. I didn't know what I wanted it to be about. I came up with a name thinking one way that I was going to go. And then I started researching cases I listened to a lot of podcasts. I listened to all you guys and so many more every day, just constantly. It's part of my life. And I knew that I wanted to do something. I just didn't know what it was. As I started researching, I came across DJ's story. And it was such a impactful story for me because one, it was local, it was close to home. And I just felt that, Amanda had done such a good job with getting her DJ story out there, talking to people. And every podcast that had done it had spent that 30 or 45 minutes on it and moved on. There was a couple that did a little bit more. But when I started researching the case and realizing what was going on, I felt like it needed so much more attention and to get, his story out there from start to finish, the good and the bad. So that's kind of where my direction went with his story. And it just kind of evolved into what it did with his story. And it was so important to me because it really pulled on me. It really, I felt like Amanda needed it. I felt like Amanda needed that extra support, that extra push because, she'd been dealing with it going on, 7 years and
Amanda's
his sister. And she just, she had went through so much in her personal life and things like that. And it really takes a toll. And it goes back to, when you start talking to victims' families and understanding what they go through. I don't know how she did it for as long as she did. It takes so much out of them and takes so much away from their current family that's there right now that people don't see. People don't understand what they're going through. So that was why I wanted to focus on that. And then it just it morphed into what it is now. And it's continued to still grow and change. Every time I go into another episode, I realize there's other things that I can do to bring light for, victims, and the justice system that's failing.
Was there something about DJ's story that you related to?
It was just so much that he as a victim was being ignored. And I think that was probably the thing that pulled on me so much is that no matter what the evidence showed, no matter what you could see that was right in front of you, his case was being ignored because he had an addiction. And that to me is we shouldn't pick and choose victims. We should be able to start to finish a victim as a victim no matter what their background is. Sure, the circumstances may come out to be that it was, something in that, but from the beginning, it needs to be treated as a victim, not as just a number that they're trying to cross off the list.
I remember I talked about my mom passing away in October, and someone came to me and they said, there's the first death that a person has, which is when they physically die. And then the second death is what we forget about. And, that's one of the neat things about certainly for the three of you guys, Nina, Dana, and Robert, that you're keeping these people alive and keeping their stories alive. And Robert, I really relate to that point of like feeling like you're not listened to, right? I think there's probably moments for all of us where we felt that. And, you think about a lot of the podcasts we listen to, Brett made a brilliant point to me that I had totally blindsided me, or not blindsided me, surprised me. But we were talking about some of the debates and some of the negative things going on in the true crime podcast world. And he said, on the flip side, it's not the mainstream media that's going to be covering the missing and murdered Native American women or, minority victims or people who are poor. And that part of what podcasts can do is really shine a light. And we've seen examples like Your Own Backyard with the Kristen Smart case. And we've seen other examples than that. There's podcasts are doing something very similar in Idaho and Washington right now, bringing cases toward resolution. So, it's neat to see you guys bring those things to the world, which is a great transition for Dana. What were you looking for?
So I had been researching the missing and unidentified since 2005. As soon as NamUs came online,
and that's the national missing persons.
Yes. And I found the Doe Network. I became, just totally invested in making comparisons between missing people and unidentified people.
What was it that originally got you to even think of that? Like,
so I mean, I think it is, it literally, I think goes back to being a child during the milk carton missing children's campaigns. I mean, every morning I would sit with my cereal.
80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember.
Well, in the 70s too.
70s.
Yeah. And I would sit and read the milk carton. And I just, it shocked me that children would go missing. It shocked me that families would not know where their children, like, I just couldn't understand it. Yeah. And so I think that followed through. I am a big mystery reader, have always been a big mystery reader. I really like that. My favorite shows were detective shows. So I think all of that sort of combined. Yes. In 1996, I had my son. That was the year that John Bonet case became, And so I was now a new mom, and I was just overwhelmed by that. And so I think that's really where it just all came together, and I started doing the research. And so did that for many years, and, was able to submit some cases, some near matches or some potential matches that could be looked at. So it was a lot of work, a lot of nope, sorry, that isn't a match. But also it was very gratifying to reach out to law enforcement and say, just want you to remember this case is happening and this person could be a potential match. Would you mind looking into it? So that happened. And then in 2018, I moved to Georgia. I started looking at Georgia cases, and I found Cobb County Jane Doe, as I call her. She was missing 36 years at the time. And she was unidentified. So this case she was discovered in 1984, and she was unidentified for 36 years.
I think I remember this case because I lived in Marietta.
Yes.
80s.
Yes.
This is wasn't there some news on this case?
Yes. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do a blog post. And just as I was getting ready to do this blog post, the Samuel Little sketches hit the airwaves. And I started looking at them, and there were Atlanta cases. And I said, oh my goodness, like this
he was the prolific serial killer.
Yes. Yes. 90. He claims at least 99 victims. And he traveled all throughout the United States. He was born in Georgia, and he returned to Georgia several times. So I started looking, and I found a redheaded woman who the sketch could potentially match the Doe. And so I just put out a blog post, and then I said, that's not enough. I need to do more. And so I started the podcast to cover that case.
Okay.
And so that was enlightening. I thought it was going to be one episode, and then I was going to have to figure out what I was going to do next. And
that's what I thought too.
Yeah, I know. And it ended up being a 7-part series because I was able to connect with a retired homicide and cold case detective who had looked at her case many times. And he was willing to talk to me, and he actually made the strong connection. I said, I was kind of afraid to ask because I was like, I'm going to sound silly whenever I ask him, could she be a victim of Samuel Little? He's going to think I'm crazy. And I asked, and he said, the most potential suspect in this case is Samuel Little. And so through his research, he had come to that conclusion, tried to get the Texas Rangers to get an answer from Samuel Little, and, were unable to get it confirmed. And so that's really what started my kind of passion for these cases and bringing does to light, sharing their stories and providing, background. So somebody might be able to say, hey, I remember a woman that disappeared in 1984, or I never saw her again. So yeah, that's what does it.
That whole story makes you wonder about something you said, Brandon, about podcasting or true crime also being about entertainment. I was on a podcast recently. I was interviewed a woman named journalist named Rosemary Romeo, who has a podcast called On the Brink. And in the middle of one question, she asked me, why did you decide to go back into journalism again? And I was like caught off guard. I was like, I have not decided to go back to journalism. She was like, you interview people, you're a journalist. And I'm like, because I think of myself more from like the advocacy side, or I would have never gone back to the journalism side, but we'll leave that one unresolved. But it makes me wonder, in thinking about what you're saying, Dana, and what you guys are saying, what do you consider yourselves? Like, are you an entertainer? Are you a journalist? Are you an advocate? Or is it some combination of all of that? What do you guys consider yourself?
An investapodster.
I like that.
Me
That's
too.
cool. Yeah.
I don't know, call it edutainment.
It's a great way to think about it. Edutainment. Anyone else have thoughts on that, Dana?
I mean, I like to consider myself an investigator, hence the PI at the end of my name, the podcast name. But I think it's about education. It's about amplifying the voices of the voiceless for me.
And Robert, I imagine it'd be something similar.
It's exactly, yeah, I would say exactly. I consider myself an advocate. And that's I'm not a journalist. I'm not an entertainer.
Yeah,
Entertainer.
Yeah.
But I mean, one of the interesting things, you guys all do a little bit of each of those things, right? There's there's an element to it that's investigating. There's an element to it that's research. There's an element that involves communication and communicating to the public. How about you, Brandon? What are you?
I don't know how you'd really classify it, but I mean, just pushing the fact, like I said, kind of before, the 911 dispatcher, how they would have to deal with these horrible calls for someone else's horrible piece of their life that's happening, not just, right then. It's a lot of times the very first minute or second that they have found out this horrible thing is happening. And you're right there. One of the things I've kind of mentioned on the show before is that, if you have a domestic violence situation, a lot of times when they call you on the phone, it is going on right then. It's really, really bad. You can hear screaming and things being thrown around. And then in the course of time that a police officer can go out there, they've completely changed it's completely different dynamic. So you're really hearing the nitty gritty of everything that's going on right then and there as soon as it's happening.
Sort of like an intense, unique moment in their lives that I'm guessing they probably couldn't even explain it afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Most people don't, if they try to recall their 911 call, they don't really remember too much about that. And the dispatcher is also kind of the same way. I mean, because we deal with so many, I've said it before. I can remember some of the calls that I took when I was a first month dispatcher. I can't remember some of the calls I took last week.
Right. Right. That they were that impressionable. Yeah. I never really thought of 911. You're at a unique, intense moment in people's lives that, maybe the scariest, most frightening, most dangerous moment. And you're there for those. It's interesting. When you think of it. And then last but not least, Jason.
Oh, gosh. Oh, no.
Outside of, it's funny because, you and I will do battle over this. You can call yourself an entertainer. I call you the spreader of love. But go ahead. How do you see yourself?
I mean, obviously the show is entertainment. And I have a lot of fun doing it. And I do, I think sort of sometimes I do try to spread joy and love and all that. But I do think, again, sometimes I'm trying to facilitate conversations or say things to make people think about the conversations that go on in the space. So that maybe they will, I mean, I don't want to say approach things the right way, but differently, with more kindness, because everything is so with more kindness, because everybody's so angry all the time, and I don't want to be angry. I just want to make people laugh and be happy, and be nice. So I mean, it's just kind of taking a fun look in the mirror.
You can look at things the exact same way. Like a bad event happens, and you can look at it as something ugly or something to be angry about, or you could look for opportunity.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
You can look for gratitude in places.
Right.
But for you, I'm going to slap myself bringing this up, but there's the whole ethics in true crime debate. And you guys, well, you may not know, but Jason knows I've stuck my head.
Oh,
I just stuck my head into it.
oh yeah.
And
You hear that? That's the sound of millions of people panicking to get last-minute gifts. Or it's a car horn. Either way, it's not you, because you're getting all your gifts this year on Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. Drizzly lets you send beer, wine, and spirits to almost anywhere in as little as 60 minutes, or schedule up to 2 weeks in advance, making it the ultimate gifting hack for the holidays. Compare prices on drinks from local stores and avoid the chaos, the lines, the traffic, and the, "Hey buddy, learn to drive. I'm recording an ad here." It's for Drizzly, a super convenient drink delivery app that makes gifting for the holidays effortless. Yeah, you can send drinks right to anyone's door. What's that? You wish you knew about Drizzly earlier? You're literally scrambling to find gifts as we speak? Well, I'd download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com right now. Must be 21 and over, not available in all locations.
I'm just curious, from your perspectives, what does it mean to be an ethical podcaster, period?
For me, it's kind of difficult sometimes because I'm trying to portray what a 911 dispatcher would be experiencing while they're taking this call, at the same time that I'm playing a call, because I play real 911 calls on the show. This really kind of concentrated, immense, really hardcore portion of this person's life. And it's kind of difficult to do this sometimes. I mean, I'm a lot of times at odds saying, should I play this on the show? Should I do this? And, most of the time I end up saying yes, because people need to know that this is what a 911 dispatcher actually will deal with. And a lot of times, multiple times a day, and kind of the effects that it might have on some people. I mean, one dispatcher may take this as it's just another call. And, I have to say I kind of find that way about myself, because I take one call and it's a really bad call, and the next second I'm right on another call. Some dispatchers may not feel that way. They have to, get up for a minute. They have to walk away from their headset and their computer. And sometimes it might be an incident that just really sticks with them, and they have varying levels of PTSD. So to the ethics part of it, on my show, it's kind of hard to really lay that down, because an ethical person may say, okay, I don't want to play this, but at the same time, I'm trying to push the knowledge that these dispatchers, I mean, it's rarely am I on the show like with my calls, but that these dispatchers have to deal with. So that's my forefront, showing the dispatcher and what they're doing. I want to be able to push out these really hard and, I guess, divisive topics.
But it sounds like you do have some kind of ethical framework, some kind of balancing act that you're doing. Because I think, there is this broader true crime ethics debate, but I also think that our ethics are really rooted in our own morals and our own values, not necessarily publicly the way that it's been portrayed, but certainly it sounded like what you were describing was kind of an ethical balancing. What do you weigh when you're deciding whether to include something?
If it just kind of sticks out to me, some of the, here recently, because my podcast, I'm probably just like any podcast, changes along time. I don't really do the extreme deep dives that some other shows do. And in fact, like this past episode I had 3 separate incidents on it in the course of about 30, 35 minutes. So it's enough to where you can get an outline of what happened. It's mostly, again, with
almost probably like the feel of being there, getting that many.
And plus the fact too that a lot of people don't know this. Most dispatchers don't know what happened after they get off the phone call.
They never find out.
So I try to bring a little bit of that as well. There's been calls that I've taken, and then a couple days later, I'll see news in an article about it. I'm like, oh, so that's what happened. And
So a lot of it ends up just unresolved. Because some of
it's
it's not going to make it in the news.
well, yeah, it's most people don't know that most of the crime that happened does not end up in the news. So like you see that a shooting happened at a Kroger or something like that. That you might see that, but you don't know that there's been probably 20 or 30 other shootings that happened that were unreported to the news.
Right. Is it hard to not know?
Yeah, it's not really, not anymore. I kind of found a place that, for instance, probably about a month or two ago, I was right at the end of my shift, and the last call that I got was a guy that says, my brother's inside and he has a sword to his chest. He's threatening to kill himself. And I stayed on the phone with him for it's probably 4 or 5 minutes while the police were on the way there. And he says, oh, the police are here now. And I was like, okay, I'll go ahead and let you go. I got up and left. No idea what happened. So, I mean, you just kind of get used to it after a while. You know that there's a big puzzle that happens with police, fire, medics, district attorneys, prosecutors, whatever like that. You have a role in it, and that's your role. Once you're finished with it, there's nothing more for you to do.
This is far afield from the ethics debate, but that what you're saying just made me wonder, like, in some of the work I do, I've worked with EMTs, I've worked with, like whether it's psychologists or police officers or, like, how do you stay whole and bring your walls down and take risk in life and be vulnerable when you're constantly surrounded by, people being harmed or bad things happening? I tell this story all the time about like being a crime reporter, and this one story, because I had become kind of like immune to it all. And this one story of this little girl who was walking by a school building and a brick fell off the side of the building, hit her in the head. She died. Just and the randomness of death, for some reason, that stuck in my head. But I realized over time, I stopped feeling the bad things, which then made it really hard to find joy or take risks or be bummed. And I guess this is a decent question for all of you guys because you're immersing yourself in these kinds of things. But start with you, Brent.
I mean, I look around and everybody's a suspect. I mean, I to like be kind of comedic like that, but I mean, it does make you think about things differently in the world. I mean, I would love to be one of the people that are completely oblivious to what happens really in the world every day. People can walk through a downtown area and have the blind sense of knowledge that they are completely and totally safe and nothing's ever going to happen to them. And, I'll walk down the same place they do when I'm looking around for people with a weapon or some sort of bad thing that's happening, just anything like that. And it's, I think most dispatchers, police officers, they all have that kind of, even without really thinking about it, like it's there in their mind somewhere.
And I don't think we think often about people, whether they're first responders or others, or like even you guys as podcasters, that you're paying an emotional price for the rest of us to do what you're doing. Dana?
That question? Or okay. So
I switch questions when I find that out.
Yeah. So can you repeat it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about just sort of that idea of how do you manage the emotional toll of what you're doing while at the same time staying whole. Because there's so many negative things that we're involved in. There's so many, we're hearing victim stories and we're hearing the risks they took, might affect our willingness to be vulnerable and take risks, may change our lives. So like, how do you stay whole in doing all of this?
So I really feel that reading about these cases, learning about these cases, I'm driven to learn about them because I care about the people. And so it's a way for me to take my I have a passion for this. I want to help. I want to provide answers. I want to, bring this story to the forefront and maybe generate a lead or whatever. So I think that what I do is I really strongly focus on what the result of what I can do to make this better. Now, agreed, you look at the world differently. You think, like, I have a friend who has a daughter and she gets so tired. She's 12 and she gets so tired of me saying, okay, be careful when she's on the internet because of it. So I become like this, advice giver, this educator at any drop of a hat. I have 2 sons and I would tell them things like, if you go out to a bar, a lot of young men are disappearing late night at a bar. They end up in the river. Just be aware. So I'm always, people kind of, don't put your drink down. Yeah. So there is that. I feel that I like that because I feel like I'm educated. I don't like not being in the know. And so I like to balance, it's like a balance is the world for me. Like I get to be in the know, but it really doesn't affect me. Like when I meet people,
it almost makes you less anxious about them.
I think it actually does. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting. It's not the first time I've heard some version of once it makes sense, it becomes a little bit easier to walk. Jason, I'm going to skip you because you're the one who makes sense emotionally.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Nina, then Robert.
So for me, it's that if this person can endure what they went through, I can sit with it for a week or 2. Mm-hmm. I have the ability to let it go and they don't, and their loved ones don't.
Right. So it's almost like it becomes a bit of a gift. I can give it back. I can help you.
Yes.
And
hopefully.
Yeah. Robert.
So for me, I can answer both your questions with this ceremony.
Okay, cool.
So I become emotionally involved with every case that I look at, and it's different levels of emotion. Obviously, some I get drawn in and it pulls me in, and I have to take myself out of the situation for a small break, listening to Jason, to watching stupid shows on TV that have nothing to do with true crime. But I feel that it helps me be better, and it continues to let me be a better advocate because I do get emotionally involved. And I think on the ethical side, when people lose that emotion and it becomes a task, or their mindset thought becomes about making money, and they take that emotion out of it, they stop realizing that there's 2 sides to every story. They can't take that middle ground and be objective. They're going to stand on their hill and fight it till the end, no matter what that result is. And to me, that's where the ethical portion comes in, as they become unethical. And not saying that everybody that does that is unethical, but their actions show to be more unethical than normal.
Yeah.
Than what they should be for what we're doing.
Bring less good. Yeah. I was telling someone recently that I don't like to be in the public spotlight. I've done enough of that. But, the Delphi case really gets under my skin as somebody who's a former journalist and, thinking about, on one hand, like mainstream media has been okay on the story, but we live in a whole new paradigm with like YouTube creators and other things along those lines. So this is a topic I've sort of stuck my head out on and gotten a couple whacks at it. Accusations of very interesting things. But, I was just on the Murder Sheet podcast with Kevin Greeley and Anya Kane, and we were sort of talking about the idea that there are a lot of overwrought debates about ethics, but there's some plain things out there that we collectively, let's say as the broader true crime community, did I just say we? As I'm trying to pull myself out, but I keep finding myself back in. But that there are, all the good that we're talking about comes in the world, but there are these sort of like blatantly, to the point Robert was making about like sticking to your point, not being open to new ideas, or exploitative stuff or, and I think for me, maybe that's part of the reason why I try to hide out of true crime and make it nebulous is like, there's a part of me that's so proud to be a part of this group. And then there's a part of me that is just kind of ill at some of what happens. And we don't have clear guidelines or definitions or anything like that. But, and it's been tough to navigate, right? Like, cause there are times where I've thought, I'll have this person as a guest on my show. And then I research a little bit and I'm like, I will never have this person anywhere near me. So spinning it into a positive, right? Like, what are some of the things that we as creators can do to either improve the work we do or the community, the broader true crime community that we have? Jason, I'll give you that one as a start.
Oh, man. Tell jokes. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, this is a difficult question because I try to, I've stuck my head in a couple times too, and I've gotten some whacks at it. But I think for me, the thing that bothers me the most in this conversation this big conversation is when the victims are forgotten and when the focus, Robert said it perfectly a couple minutes ago. I mean, the Delphi thing to me, I get really upset and emotional about that because, I mean, it's just tragic, and that's obviously one of the hornet's nests in this space right now. There's a lot of really, really ugly things happening. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Why'd you ask me? I got dressed like Santa Claus.
It's kindness clause. Why did I ask you? Well, I mean, I think well, first of all, let's start with the fact that you know everyone.
I know a lot of people.
You get along with everyone. Whether you really like them or not, I don't know. But you get along with everyone. But I also think like you do care about those things like helping people, staying victim centric, and you're able to bridge the gap. And now I'm actually being serious and find common ground with a lot of people who are very different than.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I thought.
Well, I think just it goes back to what I said earlier is that my default mode is to be kind. And I think that's why, I have so many people that I get along with. And, I think, I genuinely do want to help. I want to help everybody, really. That's why I'm so glad that my podcast has been so well received because it seems to be helping people. Like I can tell you how many people have reached out to me and said, I used to hate decorating for Christmas and now I love it because I listen to your show when I do it. Or I ride around and look at Christmas lights.
Recently you said something like they had lost a loved one and then last Christmas they came across your show or it had happened several years back and they were dreading Christmas, but it brought their Christmas.
See, I mean, for me, that gets me jazzed up. But, I just always try to operate from kindness and also with the understanding that I don't know what's going on in the other person's life. I don't know what they're dealing with. I don't know, because we're all fighting our own battles, we're all, a little bit broken. But, I think through conversation, which is what I love about your show so much, is that you are able to develop, real relationships. I mean, when I first did your show the first time, we had just chatted like that Saturday. I just wanted to get to know you. And we had just chatted and then you had a guest drop out and you're like, hey, can you come on the show tomorrow? And I was like, sure, I guess. And then 3 hours later, we're done recording, and then we talked for another hour after that. So, I think conversations are really important. I think a lot of people are scared to have conversations because they are so dug in on their own bias or their own point, because their ego can't handle being wrong. But the only way to get to the truth is to sometimes be wrong. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to fail. I know. So am I. 93. But like, I just think that like, if we all kind of just step back a little bit, take the ego out, really try to start it with the victim or the case or whatever the thing is that we're trying to get the answer to. Start there and then like have the like understanding that we're all trying to get to the same spot and do it in as civil and I don't want to say ethical now, but in the most civil way. And I just think that this would be a lot easier space to deal with. On the other hand, I mean, these are emotionally charged cases. It's really easy to sit here and say like, hey, we got to be really nice and we got to keep it, civil and not get too emotional. But like,
Elon Musk said something very interesting yesterday. Or was it the
I don't know.
day before? Yeah, day before. Yes, when he was on the stage. But he made this comment like, wanting to be liked is a weakness.
Yeah.
Because it provides opportunity. I was like, wow, this dude doesn't get it.
Huh.
That like, you don't have to want to be liked to be liked. You
Right.
just have to be nice.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think of so many of the creators within your space who I adamantly disagree with. Even Brett and Alice,
Mhm.
like, on their Murdoch thing, I was like, yeah. And there are other things I think on the Jameson's episodes they just had, totally disagree with them. But I can have like a respectful, cool conversation with them and many other people when I disagree on cases.
Right.
Or I disagree on, I don't know, flowers or whatever it is. I wanted to just throw it to all you guys to make any closing comments you want to make. And before we turn it over to listeners, and if there are any listeners who are listening, because I can see there are some, if you go to the December 2nd Atlanta podcast chat, which is on the Silver Linings Fireside chat, and drop a question in there, we'll take those questions too. Give you guys a chance to close, then we'll turn it over to you guys for any questions. So, start with Nina.
I just thank everybody for showing up and tuning in.
Mhm.
Robert?
Same,
Not allowed to say same.
Same.
If an answer is taken,
If
she
it's-
gets the out. I can't do it.
I appreciate the ability to have a group of people to discuss things with, to be able to do things like this and have an outlet for what I do. And I appreciate the people that listen and continue to come back and listen to me, even though I don't feel like, my voice is worth listening to. I appreciate the ones that do.
Well, that's right. Little does he know.
I mean, I think everyone's voice is worth listening to, but I definitely think like I'll skip ahead to mine. I appreciate being surrounded by so many people who have such good values and do good things, including you, Robert. But Jason, we already sorted it.
Yeah, I appreciate the chance to get together with some awesome podcasters that let me dress like this around them, and they're not embarrassed to be around me. I'm thankful for everybody that's tuned into the show. I'm thankful for the opportunities I've had to be on, a guest on other shows, and Merry Christmas.
Dana?
So I just like to say ditto what everyone has said. I really enjoy having these conversations. I am a big believer in collaboration over competition. And I think that is part of the problem that we have today in true crime world. Yeah, exactly. So, so I just want to say thank you to everyone who has listened to my podcast. I'm hoping I took a break. I was working for Uncovered as a consultant contractor. My contract is coming to an end. And so I will be heading back into the podcasting.
Look forward to being out there promoting you.
That's right.
So, great.
Really, I just love doing anything like this where I'm around so many other podcasters that, before I did CrimeCon the first time, I knew very few other podcasters other than just chatting online, but like actually getting together with people that are in the same kind of space. It's really amazing because you yes, you all have shows and stuff like that. And it's, everybody has like a varying level of success and stuff like that. But when you're all together and you're just chatting about everything that you're doing, it's like so much amazing stuff, you know. I mean, like bringing, light to, a person that otherwise probably wouldn't have it, that's something that like my show doesn't get into that. I really appreciate a lot of what you guys are doing because I mean, yes, mine is focused. It's, it's really kind of its own thing, but like I hear stuff like this and I get inspired. I'm like, I want to do stuff like that. So
That's awesome.
it's really good.
Well, you can always have a second podcast, Brandon. Trust me, Jason will start one with it. So I'm going to go ahead and thank you guys. I really appreciate it. We're going to take some questions from these folks. I'm going to go ahead and start with one from the chat. And this is from Sophie, who some of you guys know. She says, one thing I often think about is how each of these podcast hosts are storytellers, and they each do it in a different, unique way. And I wonder how in doing these podcasts, much of their own lives have been altered by choosing to do a podcast and by the people and subjects they discuss. I can simply say every interview I do changes me. Yeah, absolutely. Like I have lots of things that happen, but I probably not had a year of growth like the year of growth I've had doing this podcast. It's not even possible. So, Nina, back to you.
So, I didn't know that I would end up being a missing persons advocate on top of doing the podcast. And I've met a lot of great families and a lot of great peace officers. And I'm really grateful for these relationships and how they've changed me and my perception about the world that I live in.
Yep. I feel that same kind of.
So for me, it has given me a different perspective because, like I said, I've listened to true crime. I've listened to podcasts for a very long time, but being in it and telling the stories, and that's one of the biggest things that I say is, I haven't lived this and I haven't done and had to go through what people have to go through. I just tell the story and I want to tell it the best way possible. But I've learned so much about how us as a people fail other people. And it's horrible when we look at it in a big scheme of things of why is this person getting the attention and why isn't this person getting the attention? When you start mirroring those things, it's so frustrating to me. So that's my push and my drive is that I want to make sure that every person it's the same level field and everybody has the same chance of justice.
Well, it's kind of cool that you actually got to bring that to life in an actual case. It's part of the value that you bring. Jace?
So how has it altered my life? That's the question.
Well, we're all different all storytellers in different ways. And what Sophie was essentially wondering, and we do it in our unique way, she was wondering how our own life stories are altered by choosing.
Okay. Well, I don't sleep very much. I probably know more Christmas music than all of you combined. The way it's altered my life really is that I have been very fortunate to be allowed into this incredible network of people. I can call up almost any podcaster in the space and ask them to do a voice on the show, or they'll call me up and ask to do a voice on the show. And I have roles for everybody. Brandon's been on a couple times already. Brandon played an elf in one.
Maybe two.
Was it a couple episodes? Could have been a couple episodes. And it's just been a really thrilling couple of years for me in this space. And I've had a lot of opportunities that have come out of it from a business professional side. So that's really exciting. But yeah, it's just been really cool to learn from everybody. Everybody's so much better at this than I am. And I love just being around their genius. And I just appreciate the friendships I've made.
You know, tell them about the podcast.
You can't. I'll let you tell them.
Well, let me do it toward the end, Dana.
So I think for me, this podcasting has given me the opportunity to really talk to families. I, had imagined what it would be like. I feared that, I have 2 sons and I can't say as a mom, I wasn't worried that, how would I go on if something happened to one of my children. And having the opportunity to sit with families who have literally experienced one of my biggest fears and to hear them, really bring that to life every day that they live with this. And then being able to connect those families either with resources or experts so it has put me smack dab in the middle, and Uncovered did this. Working for Uncovered, we have worked with a lot of families. We've gotten their cases up on the site, and now I can share resources. I can provide information. I can educate families or, give them information they need.
This might actually be a good moment for another one of the questions that we got in the chat. Sorry, guys. But Liz, who was in the chat, asked about thinking of that idea of helping people. Are there databases? Are there resources that can be cross-referenced for missing children or unidentified people? Like if you're not a podcaster or you're not a researcher, where can you go? What can we do?
You did the Doe and the missing.
Right. So, the Doe Network is a great website. The NamUs database, which is the National Missing Database, Missing and Unidentified Database.
That's the Department of Justice.
Yes. Uncovered.
I want to talk about the NamUs database, so I'm going to wait till you're done.
Okay.
I want to address it.
Okay. The Uncovered database, there are about 50,000 cases in the Uncovered database. Those have narratives, maps, timelines in many cases. And so that would be, those would be the databases. And then, of course, we have a lot of nonprofit organizations who will work with families of missing and unidentified.
Okay.
One of my concerns about NamUs, it's a great resource and it's got a lot of good information, but states are not required to enter their missing into NamUs.
Mm-hmm.
So coming from Michigan, which had a population of roughly 10.5 million people, we have I'm guessing, 2,500 people in NamUs.
Oh, wow.
And then moving to Georgia, which also has a population of about 10.5 million people, there's only about 600 people in NamUs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Because Georgia never required that people be entered. Whereas Michigan had a huge campaign a few years ago, led by the Michigan State Police, to get people entered into NamUs. Mm-hmm. So if you're listening, please ask your legislator to put forth something that makes missing people get entered into NamUs.
Mm-hmm.
For those other ones, like the Doe Network or some of the other ones you mentioned, how do their databases get larger? Do they seek out cases? They're like more aggressive and assertive about getting information?
So the Doe Network adds as they can. They're a volunteer organization, so they're limited to their resources. But it is a fantastic resource. I mean, it goes back years, and Todd Matthews, who is the first citizen detective, solved a Doe case in 1999, I believe. Started the Doe Network, worked to also create the NamUs database with the government. And Nina is so right about this, where, without law enforcement entering these cases, there are major holes and gaps. Tennessee, because Todd actually lives in the state of Tennessee, Tennessee has a really, they're required. Yeah. So they're one of the required states. But there's 13 states, I think, in the United States required to add cases. So those things get added by concerned, yes, exactly. And Uncovered is the same. They accept citizen submissions. Families will come to Uncovered and ask that we add them to the database. So that's really what's driving it right now. We have never had law enforcement ask us to add a case to our database. So there's a huge gap there.
Does the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children have anything?
NCMEC has a database that is searchable. and, they do great work, especially with some of the age progression photographs, but it's not always,
Up to date.
it's not always up to date. And I don't want to say anything bad about NCMEC because there's really nothing bad to say, but
we all have
their
room
their interface is not great.
Mhm.
I find their interface really clunky. Yeah, user interface is not terrific.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. I worked right down the street from them, so I'll start lauding. If you see one guy with a sign, please picture it. No, but they are great people. When are the three of you going to come on my show?
Whatever you want.
Well, yeah. Whenever you want to
Yeah,
say it.
absolutely.
Whenever you want.
Okay.
And I want to be something like an elf or something.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think wherever who's going to be in, which one of us are going to be in maybe season 3? Please.
Well, 2 of them will,
Yeah.
I hope. And then you're in the season finale of season. I know I haven't given you your script yet. So, but I finished writing it for the 15th time the other day, and I love it.
I'm excited because
think
it's
it's
not
good.
going to be the character everybody was speculating.
I know, exactly. It's actually, we talk about me introducing the conversations that people don't want to have. The character that you play is a big conversation maker. Yeah. It looks at, sort of commerce and true crime. So you'll play a character that is very,
Which is like
very
hilarious, right?
Yes.
It's like the opposite.
Yeah. So, I think it'll be fun.
I have a question. What's the podcast you're going to do together?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So our concept is essentially a podcast that really focuses on telling the stories of people who have been able to bring some good out of tragedies in their lives. So thinking of people who are like victims of crime, family members, law enforcement, even convicted criminals who have been released and done something good, but being able to look at these very difficult events, kind of like you guys were talking about at the end, a lot of the stories in true crime end with a sad part. Mm-hmm. So picking up the ball on the stories that if it were not for that bad thing, something good wouldn't come into the world. And so we thought of people like Stacey Chapin and Ethan Chapin's mom in the University of Idaho, and Ethan Smile charity and the students who are now going to school because of that. And they're also partnering with a group that is working on missing and murder Native American women, or somebody like Bruce Maitland, who, when his daughter Brianna went missing, part of his work afterwards led to, I'm going to get the name wrong. It's the investigators.
Private investigations for
the missing. Or even someone, even though I know she's somewhat controversial, Amanda Knox, right? She went through that terrible situation where she was wrongfully convicted in Italy and has come back and become an advocate around all sorts of different things. So sort of exploring and telling those stories is where we're sometime in 2024.
Yep.
I love that idea because there are so many families who have bounced back in that, and, have pushed forward, I think, and it's been healing to them to create a foundation or to enact a new law or something like that. So it will be, I will be listening for sure.
Thank you.
For sure.
Pressure's on now.
Yeah.
I know.
Now you said it out loud.
I know. Should have cut that out of the finished episode.
For the record, I didn't tell him I would be springing this one on.
I know. Took me by surprise.
No pressure.
You're right.
No pressure at all. Anything else, guys?
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great job.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
I really appreciate having you guys here. Going back to what I was saying in the beginning, it's so shocking to me that I would find my people in either podcasting or in the true crime community. But I really do love your values. I appreciate you. I feel the same way Carly does when she was saying, like, I've met wonderful friends here, friends who have been supportive and kind and loving and compassionate, and anything I can do to help you guys bring more good in the world, just let me know.
Awesome.
It's a wrap.
Very good. I'm stopping recording.
I'm Jason Blair, and this is the Silver Linings Handbook Podcast. We'll see you all again in a few days.